And good evening, everyone. Glenn Hauser here, filling in for Mundungus Creevy, who is tending to some family football business. So he is doing football tonight, but involves measuring a helmet. Anyway, I am here with Cam Parker and Gage Madrid, my co-host for tonight, and our co-host every Tuesday night. And guys, we have a boatload of stuff to talk about. So this is actually fun. We're those days of trying to manufacture any sort of thing to talk about are over. We've got plenty. How are you guys doing tonight?
Doing fantastic, man. Been at training camp every single day that they've had open practices. What's up, John? Good to see you, my friend. And it's just been really awesome to have football back in the Mile High City. The energy around Dove Valley is just absolutely phenomenal. Glenn was out there with me. What was it, Friday, right? Or Saturday?
Saturday morning, yeah.
Saturday, yeah. So Glenn was out there, and it was just a really, really grand time out there. Got to watch practice with a bunch of good people on that Saturday practice. So it's just been really, really awesome to have football back.
Yeah, it was great. Obviously, I didn't have the opportunity to go to camp yet, but I did have the great time of actually having Glenn stock my workplace, and so that was lovely. So I had the chance to finally meet Glenn for the first time. I have yet to meet Gage, but I will be there on August 5th, so I'll be there this upcoming Saturday. So hopefully if you guys are there in person, not just Gage, but anybody that is in the chat, if you guys want to like physically stalk me and find me where I am located with me, Brandon, the other host that I'm with for Mainly Broncos will also be there. So Brandon, myself, and my dad will be there. So come say hi.
Awesome. So unfortunately, we have to start the show out with some sad news as far as yesterday was not a good day for the Denver Broncos, especially the wide receiver room. You know, Tim Patrick, fan favorite, a team favorite, a Sean Payton favorite already, went down just on his own, a few steps away from the line of scrimmage, let out a scream, and everyone's fears were realized when they diagnosed it as a completely torn Achilles, rendering him out for the year. This is after he tore his ACL almost a year to the day and was out for last season as well. Just takes the wind out of the breath right out of you, doesn't it, guys?
Absolutely. And that was just the whole vibe at Dove Valley. You just heard a collective gasp. It was the second play of 7-on-7s. He was coming out of a 3-receiver little triangle set, basically doing a little twist release. He takes 2 steps and just crumbles to the ground. Again, he screams in pain, throws his gloves and his helmets in frustration. You just knew that he knew that it was something serious, and that obviously after having to go through that last year, you just feel for Tim Patrick, the person. And then obviously we're going to talk about KJ Hamler a little bit later, but one thing I am hoping is that those two are still living together, because they need each other right now. They both need that support system and that structure to just, quite frankly, keep them out of the dumps, because these are going to be, just for both of them, trying times mentally and physically, especially for Timmy P. But with KJ having gone through a bunch of injuries as well, I mean, I really just hope that those two are still living together to have that structure and that support system. But it's devastating for Tim Patrick, but it's also devastating for the Denver Broncos. I mean, Tim Patrick was expected to have a big role in this offense this season. Russell Wilson, the chemistry between him and Patrick was already evident in both last year's training camp and this year's training camp. And it's crappy and ironic that on the first padded practice, both last year and this year, Tim Patrick suffers a season-ending injury, and we're not going to get to see that chemistry on the field. But there are pieces that can step up for the Denver Broncos in the absence of Tim Patrick. We saw that today with Marquez Callaway. Brandon Johnson was in there, although he did get scolded because he lined up incorrectly. Peyton ripped him a new one. But we do have the depth to absorb this blow, but just off the field, man, from a leadership perspective, this one stings.
Yeah. It definitely blows, and it was pretty evident, and obviously we'll talk about even more about this stuff, but if I'm not mistaken, the interception that happened with Russell Wilson happened almost immediately after this play, And, we can dive a little bit too much, into that a little bit later, but you would almost think that with the presence that Patrick had and was felt in that room with that injury almost had some correlation to his loss on that next play with Russell Wilson. So, but that just goes to show you just how impactful and how present it was, as far as how he has felt within that team and with that locker room, of course, the fans, and I just think that, here's a player who has really, really emerged as, for some teams, possibly a receiver one, and maybe even for some teams, a very, very consistent and higher end wide receiver number two. But for his career to go with the way it was from the University of Utah to be an undrafted free agent, to actually sign with the Denver Broncos, if not mistaken, on a futures deal, and actually come from the San Francisco 49ers, where he never really made it there. But then he comes to the Denver Broncos and works his tail off to really become the player that he is today, is evident to both Tim Patrick and the Broncos ownership and Broncos, front office and franchise, to give him that enough patience and work with him and earn not just one deal, but a second big deal that he earned. And I think,
Right.
and I think it's really evident for us to really bring in the human part of this, and anybody that wants to, really come after Tim Patrick or even KJ Hamler for that matter, need to understand that injuries are sadly a part of this, and Patrick and KJ Hamler never wanted this. And I just think that if you are looking at this and you want to be negative, get that out of here, because Tim Patrick and KJ Hamler are worthwhile and great human beings, and they have a presence within that locker room, and they will most definitely be missed. And yeah, so it is definitely sad to see. And but to what Gage said, a lot of it, is you're starting to see some of the pieces come from within. It seems that are possibly replacing a guy like a Tim Patrick. Brandon Johnson certainly seemed like he was the first person that kind of got a little bit of that action, so which was really nice to see.
So in regards to Brandon Johnson, Peyton said in his presser today, he's had some big plays. He's getting more work with the ones, which is great. He said he can run, he's flashy, but we need to eliminate repeated mistakes. Just what Gage said, Peyton referenced that, but I mean, Tim Patrick has to be one of those players for the Broncos that that Sean Payton got to know probably better than most, because he was in the facility rehabbing, all the time since Peyton was hired. Peyton called him, this is Coach Peyton, a tough-minded, a real good leader. He called it a clean injury, citing that the surgery that is upcoming, it's still unscheduled, should be almost guaranteed successful because of the way the injury worked out. But we were referencing KJ Hamler, and with KJ, he went on Instagram yesterday, mentioned he was diagnosed with a mild heart irritation called a pericarditis. Ben Albright nailed it, or called it a level 1. Level 3 is the worst. Level 1 is the most mild. It's being treated by medicine. Today, Coach Payton said it is looking like 4 weeks of treatment and 2 weeks to get into football shape. But as a result, KJ was waived by the Broncos with an NFI yesterday. What was your opinion of that?
I mean, again, just the human side of things, I feel gutted for KJ Hamler. He's somebody who has worked his ass off to be back on the football field. And nobody wants this more than him, to be back on the football field. He just mentally, it feels like, keeps getting dealt blow after blow after blow, from the ACL to his grandmother who raised him, basically his main maternal figure. And that one hits home for me because my grandmother is like my main supportive figure in my life. I live with her. I still do. That one hits home for me. I couldn't imagine where I would be without my grandma. I'm getting a little choked up on that one, but so you can see that it just feels like KJ gets dealt blow after blow after blow. And he's a guy that I just wanted to be able to overcome all of these mental hurdles. And it just feels like life has thrown him one more, but he's somebody who's got the intestinal fortitude to get through this. And the Denver Broncos have gone about this in a way that allows Hamler to potentially come back to the team.
Yeah. Right.
So the way that this is essentially going to work is that he has to become fully healthy. And after the point that he's cleared from a physical, he has to wait 3 weeks, and then the Denver Broncos can bring him back if they choose to. I feel like the Denver Broncos are going to do that because otherwise they would have just left him on NFI for the whole year. So I feel like the Denver Broncos still view KJ Hamler as part of their vision moving forward, especially in wake of the Tim Patrick injury. Sean Payton talked about how the team and KJ's agent sat down and basically had a little conversation about how the best way to approach this and move forward would be. And this is the decision that everybody involved came to. And it does seem like if there is a silver lining here, KJ should be back in the fold for the Denver Broncos after about week 4 is the timeline that I potentially heard. So we could be potentially seeing KJ Hamler in October.
And, I'm sorry, Cam, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
So it sure sounds like they're planning on bringing him back. Peyton's quote today was, when you get ready for a break or rehab, you want to know there's light at the end of the tunnel. It's important they hear that from me and George, and that's the purpose of the meeting we had with KJ. So, I mean, like Gage said, there's no reason to go with the path that they did and have these meetings with the agent and give the impression that they're going to bring him back if they're not planning on bringing him back. So, thinking about both those players, from a football sense, because we like both these guys and how they just the way they seem personally. But from a football standpoint, thank goodness we did not trade Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, or any of the other guys that were mentioned over the offseason, because, wow, we would have been in a position like last year for sure. Which
not to put some of the fans under the bus here, but some fans were clamoring for us to trade Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton. Some of the, and so to put that into perspective, this is one of those reasons why the Broncos did exactly what they did. And also, kudos to Sean Payton and going out and bringing in guys that could possibly backfill some of this depth in case something like this happens. Guys like Little Jordan Humphrey, Marvin Mims, drafting Marvin Mims, or, by the way, going out and getting Marquez Callaway, who has been a little bit of a sneaky guy in camp from everything that we've been reading. I just think that overall, the stuff with KJ Hamler is just such a gut punch, because to go a little further to what you guys were talking about as well, what also makes this part of it so hard is we always viewed, not to use this very popular word when it comes to a player, but you always saw the potential with KJ Hamler and what he can be. And that's one of those things that does put a little bit of a gray area for him to come back to the Broncos, because there is a team, and it's not just the Broncos, but there is a team out there that probably could view KJ Hamler and say, look at this potential. We could probably go out and get him. And because of all the situations that happened in Denver, KJ may not want to come back and, look at a fresh start and go view it elsewhere. But that said, though, I think what favors the Broncos is because of the pericarditis, and because of the fact that the Broncos know about it, and because they are the franchise that have, been experiencing this with KJ. It's almost like an accountability thing, and also a nice little boost for KJ to where we can actually work with him and also get him in the best place of his career, both mentally and physically, to where he can potentially be the player that we see him being with a Sean Payton type of offense. So it definitely works both ways. And actually, this is kind of interesting. It almost sort of parallels in comparison to somewhat of what with Foster Moreau, because Foster Moreau had the visit with the New Orleans Saints, and this is not the Saints under Sean Payton, but Moreau had the visit with the Saints, and I forget what it was that I think it was Hodgkin's lymphoma is what he was diagnosed with during a visit with the New Orleans Saints, and as it turned out, he ended up signing that deal with the New Orleans Saints, and getting that 1 or 2 year deal, or I forget what it was that he signed for, but so I think there's a definite boost with him being associated with the Broncos in some capacity to where they can work with him and get him in the best shape of his life.
So, Cam, I know that Big E Bronco is not one of those people that you're referencing, that with the hatred, but he's throwing out the possibility that, could the Broncos release Tim Patrick and I mean, I disagree with the part about the Dalvin Cook part, but could they do it at that point? I think it sends a bad message personally. That's, that it would send a bad message to the rest of the team. Here's a guy that busted his ass to come back, a team leader, and then gets hurt again. But anything's possible. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think that it does send a really bad message, and not to correlate it to a certain extent, but it would almost be exactly like what the Packers did a few days ago with a player that they wished happy birthday to and then cut 2 hours later. I mean, it's just like, so like it to me just would scream malpractice. Like it would just scream malpractice with how that would be operating. And especially given to what you said, everything that he has given that franchise, everything he is as a leader. And also, you aren't just sending that message to like the fans and everything. You also are sending the message to the players who are so beloved within that locker room. Javonte Williams even spoke about it today, about how he and Tim Patrick were growing together, if you will, when he had his ACL, LCL, and PCL tear last year, and how they were able to grow together mentally and really recover together. And so to see the side of that and the human side of that, it just really does send a really bad message.
Yeah. On top of that, I don't think financially it'd be able to be done because this was a football injury. It happened at the team facility while he was doing a football related activity. So this wouldn't be like an NFI situation where they could release him and not have to pay him. They'd be on the hook for all of his guaranteed money if they were to strike a settlement with him. So I don't think financially it could be done. And on top of that, like all you guys alluded to, it would just send a bad message to the team. It would just send a really horrible message. Go ahead, Cam.
Well, and the other thing I was going to add to this, Gage, the one thing that is a little cold water on it is also a future talk for next year. Now, next year with Tim Patrick, that's slightly a little bit of a problem with Tim Patrick and the future of this team. So that's where the sad part with the Tim Patrick injury is kind of coming into this, is that because of the Achilles injury that he sustained, and as bad as it was, and because of he sustained the ACL injury and then the Achilles tear, which is almost similar to what Klay Thompson dealt with, different sport, but it's almost like what's similarity goes to what Klay Thompson dealt with. But to Klay Thompson's credit, he stayed with the Golden State Warriors. There's no guarantee, sadly, after this ACL injury and then now Achilles tear, that Tim Patrick is going to be in that room next year. And that's the sad reality.
And we've seen it in the NFL too. I think of someone like Tariq Cohen, who tore up his knee a couple of years ago, and then he snapped his Achilles. Unfortunately, it was on an Instagram Live while he was training. Then I think of Keanu Neal, the safety for the Atlanta Falcons, had an ACL, and then on the opposite side, on the opposite leg, had an Achilles the following year. So it may have been like a bit of an overcompensation type of injury, trying to get back and get that right leg right, and then all of a sudden you're overcompensating and you end up wearing down and ultimately tearing your left Achilles.
Yeah.
So switching gears, you mentioned Moreau, but you were talking about a different Moreau. But today we signed our own. Starts with an F as well. Fabian Moreau, the cornerback, not quarterback. Former third-round draft pick of the Washington football team back in 2017. Had 11 starts with the Giants last year and was available, and the Broncos picked him up today. Thoughts on that? And are you a little surprised they added some depth to that position?
Yeah, I'm actually not surprised they added a veteran cornerback. Now that you mentioned quarterback, it's so hard for me to say cornerback now. But yeah, there you can never have too many corners in this league. The one thing that has me scratching my head a little bit, and Gage can talk about this being at practices every day, is because of the fact that we've not yet seen Riley Moss at practice. That's the one thing that has me puzzled and stuff with this move. And because there was so much promise with what Riley Moss was going to be giving, and they traded up for him. And maybe it's a sickness, maybe it's something that's correlating to where he's just not been at practice. But with a corresponding move like this, it almost feels maybe there's something tied with this, but I don't know. And obviously, Broncos haven't released anything yet. But again, you can never have too many cornerbacks in the room. And I almost wonder, because the 1 year that he was with the Atlanta Falcons was probably his second best year in the National Football League, because his best was with the Washington football team, or the Commanders or Redskins, whenever they were the Redskins or Commanders or football team at that point in time. It's hard to keep up. But
Washington Balls.
Right.
They changed their team name like we changed our coaches.
Right. But the point is, like, for that 1 year that he was with Atlanta, which was 2021, what did Sean Payton see in Fabian Moreau in division that would make him take a chance on him? That would be the keyest thing for me but you can never have too many in the room. And so I'm definitely for it.
So who's the odd man out, Bassey?
Maybe. Yeah.
Well, right now, I saw something that was interesting. Tremon Smith, DB, who's listed as, he was brought in to be a kick returner, but he was not in the rotation today when they were doing kickoff drills. So that could be something to monitor there. Maybe Tremon Smith has either disappointed, or with the new NFL kickoff rules, they feel like they could go a little bit cheaper at the return position. So that could be something to keep an eye on, because we've seen guys such as Jaquan McMillan really step up as a backup corner. But I wanted to touch on Riley Moss a bit, because he was out there, I want to say, the first couple of days, because he had a couple of battles with little Jordan Humphrey that I got on my notes that were pretty spectacular, honestly. Humphrey got the best on one, and then Riley came and rebounded. But past 2 practices, he's been out with what Mike Kliss says is an illness. I saw that. That's what he had tweeted this morning. So I'm hoping this doesn't have anything to do with Riley, and that he's just sick and he'll be out there tomorrow. The connection there also with Fabian Moreau is Greg Minuski, the Washington defensive coordinator when Moreau was drafted. He's our linebackers coach. So obviously he doesn't work with him directly, but he knows Fabian, knows his game, knows what he's all about. So that is a little bit of a tie that binds there with Fabian and Moreau and the Denver Broncos. I don't know if this is going to be a signing that carries over into the regular season. We'll see, because we've seen guys like Jaquan McMillan, former undrafted free agent, who has really stepped up to the plate. Like, he has looked really tacky in man coverage. I don't think I've seen him blow an assignment in zone, instinctual with the ball. I mean, he's looked really, really good out there. So I feel like this is just another veteran depth signing. If something works out good with Fabian Moreau, then fantastic. If not, then he likely will not be here come week 1.
Yeah, he started. He's played 90 games, started 45 of them. But mentioning McMillan, PS2 spent some time talking about him yesterday in his interview, and just rave reviews about this guy. So,
I mean, and if you go back to the last game the Broncos played against the Los Angeles Chargers, I think it was like his lone game. And if you go back to the last handful of games, it was Lamar Jackson and Jaquan McMillan. And Lamar Jackson, who'd been in the league for a little bit, McMillan stepped up and actually took that spot from him almost in one game because of his performance against the Chargers, and should have had an interception. And to be completely honest, should have had an interception. Surprisingly, obviously the review came back and overruled it. But yeah, he clearly is on some sort of momentum. And when you are kind of like on that type of deal where you sign a 1-year deal almost, and you're with the team and you go into next year, you want to end that on a high note, so that whoever it is that you're with, the next team or that current team, you want to start that next season with that momentum. and clearly it's carried over.
So Bowana has a question, just heading back to the wide receiver discussion a few minutes ago. Would you try out Sammy Watkins, guys?
So, I mean, we probably have had some of this conversation, Gage and I, a little bit about, some of the wide receivers on social media and everything. There is some interesting options. There are a couple father time options as well. Julio Jones and T.Y. Hilton being one of them. I also like the idea of dipping into the local scene a little bit on some proven Colorado State commodities. One is Olabisi Johnson, who just happens to be a George Payton draft pick and a former CSU alum. The other is also Rashad Higgins, Hollywood Higgins from the Colorado State Rams, who actually proved to be a pretty reliable target with Baker Mayfield in Cleveland. Preston Williams.
He's available?
Yeah. Preston Williams, another CSU Ram, is available. So there are some certain choices. Sammy Watkins is definitely one of those guys. I think it seems likely, and we touched on this, but with Brandon Johnson, I think it seems likely they probably will do it from within in terms of filling it, but I would not be hating on the idea of bringing someone in. And one player I do want to make note that has kind of come out and really played well in the early part of the scene in terms of this wide receiver room, and he deserves a lot of praise, is Taylor Grimes. It seems like Taylor Grimes is a player that has really stepped up early in this camp. And if you're keeping an eye on potentially a camp darling early in this year and potentially a practice squad candidate or looking at it, Gage, you're there, but you're seeing Taylor Grimes' name everywhere.
He's gotten a couple of first team reps. Like, he's clearly made an impression with this coaching staff. He got in for at least one 11-on-11 rep that I saw today with the ones. Taylor Grimes is one of those do-it-all guys. He's got high football IQ. He doesn't miss a beat in terms of where to line up and just the intricacies of his route running. Like, he's just one of those do-it-all, Mr. Reliable kind of guys. I know that's Timmy P's nickname, but that's a nickname that Taylor Grimes could certainly develop for himself, because it feels like he's doing everything that the team is asking him to do and more. So Taylor Grimes is definitely one of those undrafted free agents to keep an eye on, but in a different position group, Jaleel McLaughlin, man, he is right now the big undrafted free agent story coming out of camp. The dude's burst, explosiveness, vision. I mean, he is insane. I don't see a scenario where he doesn't make this team. Tyler Beatty is fighting his ass off for that scat back role, but Jaleel McLaughlin is just a different kind of animal, man, and we're going to see it in the preseason. I like how Cecil Lammey actually had put it this way. I was listening to his show today. Jaleel McLaughlin needs just a crease, whereas Tyler Beatty needs a hole to explode through.
Yeah.
So Coach Payton was asked about McLaughlin yesterday, and he was talking about his work ethic, and he goes, "This guy loves it. He wants it bad." And he goes, "He's here early." They go, "What?" Like, he's like, "No, 5 o'clock early. He's here before like the guys that do the the groundskeepers and everything. He wants it bad." When your coach is saying that, are you freaking kidding me? I mean,
yeah,
that's only going to propel him to work even harder. I mean, it's but just in talking about the wide receivers, and I know we're bouncing around a little bit right now, but think about the guys like the Taylor Grimes of the team and some of the other people in that locker room. They were on the outside looking in as of yesterday morning, and now 2 spots have opened up for wide receivers. I think we're all expecting that they're gonna promote from within, but that is the business of football in a nutshell. The fact that these guys were staring at practice squad or trying to audition for another team, and here they are. Now they have an opportunity to make the 53-man.
And I think that's for fans. If you're looking at this, I think that's the bittersweet of this, because you want to see that underdog story but you also are frustrated and
Right.
and sad because of the injury. So that's the bittersweet part of this. I also will throw out a couple underrated and not wide receiver options that could be the replacement for Tim Patrick. And that would be Alberto Cuebanam and Greg Dulcich potentially being used as a possible replacement for Tim Patrick. And the way that they use them, well, you can spread them out wide, creatively. And I think that Alberto Cuebanam, obviously having his 4.49 speed, I don't know. Certainly, his name's been a bit quiet in camp lately, which is concerning if you're Alberto Cuebanam. But also, we know that no news is good news. But I think that if you're looking at maybe a possible candidate, Alberto Cuebanam is certainly appealing with the way that he could be in kind of like a converted role, not really a converted from tight end to wide receiver, but the way he is, almost like a big-bodied wide receiver at that.
So I can speak a little bit on this because as far as I know, media is not really allowed to speak on who's in on what personnel groupings. I'm not credentialed, so I feel like I can say this. Alberto Cuebanam has been running with the 4s right now. So it's been a little bit rough for him, but the role they've been using him in has been intriguing. They've been using him as a big slot as opposed to an actual like wide tight end. They've literally just almost exclusively been using him as a big slot as opposed to lining up tight to the line. And that's where his skill set could probably translate well to the NFL. It's just right now he's got to rise up to the depth chart. And we've seen them do similar groupings with Greg Dulcich as well, sort of that big slot role, stuff like that. But I believe that's something that kind of has to be kept under wraps a little bit by the credentialed media. So I just figured I should I could kind of interject a little bit on that one.
So moving on to another topic, and I'll push this up the list a little bit because Luana asked us about Dalton Reisner. He had a visit with the Vikings. I don't believe a contract was offered up to this point. It sounds like some interest in Dalton is heating up with some other teams around the league. But I think, it's safe to say that we all wish him the best and hope he can get the best contract and the best situation for him and his family. He's a good guy, continues to be a good guy in the Colorado community, which is his home state. But what do you think of that fit? And obviously they have some people on the coaching staff that know a lot about him.
Yeah, I want to say, what is it? Chris Cooper is there. Chris Cooper is down there, and he's got some familiarity down there, so that certainly helps. I do have a little bit of a theory, and obviously me being a big Dalton Reisner fan, I don't want this to be true in terms of possibly him not signing yet, and I hope that it has nothing to do with his altercation with Brett Rippon on that Christmas Day game. That's just a theory of mine. I hope that that's not the case because it's something that we've talked about before. It's not a great look when you're a Walter Payton Man of the Year candidate, but you just don't know sometimes what that is to do with possibly him signing somewhere. But I'm curious about the fit because obviously when you want to go to a place, you want to go where you're comfortable. You want to go where you think you have a fit. And from everything that I remember, Graham Glasgow and Reisner and some others are talking about Chris Cooper. They really enjoy Chris Cooper, and so I think that with Cooper being in Minnesota, I think that fit seems pretty nice for him.
Yep, absolutely.
So getting back to a story that happened after our last show, but was one that I'm still grinning about, was the Sean Payton absolutely obliterating everything associated with last year, especially Nathaniel Hackett. I know he backed off a little bit afterwards. I'm sure the ownership said, just if you could
go try to clean it up a little bit.
Yeah.
Right. But what was great was that the message was sent. He showed that he had Russ's back, and the rest of the team's back, and said, and put it all on his shoulders. Since then, Aaron Rodgers pulled a Will Smith, keep my coach's name out of your mouth. But today, Nathaniel Hackett was asked about it behind a podium and answered in such a Nathaniel Hackett kind of wimpy way. And he kind of proved the point with his response. And I'll read his response in a minute. But what was your guys' take on Peyton, Rodgers, and Hackett?
Oh man, it's like an onion. There's just so much to unpack on this. But like, I think the thing for me is he wasn't wrong. Let's just start there. He wasn't wrong. And, but I think that it was just one of those things, like he was, to use the George Payton term, he was leaving no stone unturned. Like in terms of his comment, like he was like, I mean, like he was going after he and to say George Payton, he suddenly went after George. Like, I mean, he went after
and
George.
Damani. He went after him.
So,
I don't think he was referring to Damani there. I don't think he was referring to Damani.
But yeah, so
he said president, didn't he?
I think he was referring to Greg Penner there.
Oh man.
But
wow.
I mean,
okay.
But it just goes to show you how bad it was. And for anybody that truly wants to understand, and in this camp, possibly, the Russell Wilson was the problem. Nathaniel Hackett was the problem. I mean, when you are enabling ballerina play, I mean, it's a problem. And I mean, and that was a big problem with what Nathaniel Hackett and sadly the people above Hackett were enabling. And that's the sad reality of this. And when that happens, you will be interpreted as the worst head coaching job in NFL history. You will be. So I mean, you will be interpreted as such. And he wasn't wrong. And so but by that same token, with the way that he handled it, he wasn't wrong. But I also completely understand his comments to say that he will reach out to the Jets and that he, say that, whatever it was that, he was going to be, saying to him, apologizing, whatever. So I respect him reaching out and saying, I'll reach out to them. And
in due time, though. I mean, I think he's never going to reach out. Like, yeah. I can't envision that is in 6 weeks he's going to say, Robert, I'm really sorry. Like,
yeah.
Sorry you hired that dummy. But just to give you an idea of some of the remarks from Hackett today, he said he wasn't surprised by Peyton's remarks because he's been blasting him publicly for a year as he was a Fox analyst. Hackett says, quote, obviously last week has been a very unique week for this organization. I've been involved in this business my whole life, 43 years. As a coach's kid, we live in a glass house. We know that. We all live in different rooms. We all have a key for it. It's one of those things. There's a code. There's a way things are done in that house. Come on, okay.
Come on, bro.
The fans were counting down because you couldn't get a freaking play in. The home fans. I mean, this is embarrassing. On 2 weeks in a row, you had to hire a coach for the coach. Okay, this past week it's frustrating and it sucks, but we're all susceptible to it. The things you do, the mistakes you make, it costs you time on the field, it costs you your job, all those things. And I own all that stuff. That's a fact. I've got no excuses. Like,
I will say. Oh, go ahead.
I don't know. Like, grow a pair. Like, stick up for yourself. Something. He just said he was right.
Yep.
He actually, like, by that last part, you lose your job. You make mistakes. You own that.
Or he was going after you for a year. Like, you basically admitted that he's been going after you since you've, been with the Broncos.
Yeah.
So.
Right.
I will also say, I don't think I've ever, aside from the little jab he took at the Jets organization as a whole, I have never heard Peyton personally attack Nathaniel Hackett as the person. I will quote the great Bruce Arians here. If your football sucks, I will call you out and tell you that your football sucks, but that doesn't mean I don't have respect for you as a man. Mm-hmm. And I don't think I've ever heard Sean Payton go out there and call out Nathaniel Hackett's character,
Right.
like Aaron Rodgers wanting to paint out. I think pretty much everyone here can sit here and agree that Nathaniel Hackett's a good human being. He seems like a down-to-earth dude that probably would be fun to have a beer with and have a conversation with, but not somebody that you want to manage 60 plus alpha personalities, because no matter what, I mean, there's an alphas amongst alphas, but if you're playing in the NFL, you are an alpha personality. You are a dog. So
Right.
you have to have someone who can manage those kind of personalities. And Nathaniel Hackett was dog shit at
Let's
it.
hug it out, man.
Yeah.
All right. So another thing that happened in the last week that got Broncos country excited, and then Sean Payton was asked about it the following day and gave a very lackluster response that basically made me lose all hope that would happen. But Shelby Harris visited the Broncos, was there in the building while training camp was happening. He lives in Denver still, and he was not signed. And the next day when the media asked Peyton about it, he essentially said, we're going to be talking to a bunch of people, and he just happens to live down the street. So for that 24 hours, so it sure seemed like we were going to get one of the most popular players in recent memory.
That's okay. We're going to sign Ndamukong Suh. We're going to sign Yannick Ngakoue. That's okay. No, but I definitely would be a little bit upset with Shelby. I did find it interesting, though. It was a formal meeting. Like, it was a formal meeting, not something, like it seemed like it wasn't wanting to be leaked, if you will. But like it was, it was just it was a formal meeting. But I think it'll be interesting in the coming days as he's having these visits and meeting with teams. It's still a possibility until that pen hits the paper. Until the pen hits the paper, there's always a possibility, and there's always room for my optimism to grow. So, I'm really looking forward, hopefully, that we can get something done with him. Because it's evidenced by the Uwama Wazirike decision and news that they need some depth. However, to go a little into the defensive line, it certainly seems like the defensive line and pass rush has probably been maybe the biggest takeaway of camp. Is that safe to say?
Yeah, I'd say it's up there for sure.
But what's funny is just like when Vic was asked about the offense, and as a defensive coach, he never wanted to give flowers to any. He would always kind of downplay anything that his offense was doing against his defense. Same thing with Sean Payton. As the offensive coach, and the offense hasn't performed to. It's right at the beginning. There's a lot being installed at this point. But, asking about, the Zach Allens of the world and things like that, he says something and then he goes, it's early. So we're seeing it from the coaches are very, very territorial depending on which side of the ball that they specialize.
Yeah. But to touch on the D line a little bit more, man, we are seeing guys step up. Zach Allen, first of all, has been one of the biggest storylines of training camp. This dude is a monster. He is wreaking havoc in the backfield. Making guys like Quinn Miners, even Ben Powers look silly out there. He has gotten several TFLs, several sacks, which would have been in in-game situations. He's been just super phenomenal. I look over here and I see 99 popping up on my notes so often. You'd think I'm scouting JJ Watt out there. Or
Jay-Z.
Or Jay-Z, yeah, seriously. But Zach Allen has been phenomenal. Matt Henningsen has kind of been like a baby Zach Allen almost out there. What's up, Mundungus? Good to see you, my friend. But again, with guys like Matt Henningsen stepping up as well. He has again looked like a baby Zach Allen out there. We've seen guys like Tyler Lancaster, who he signed out of retirement. He's getting reps with the ones, and those are just talking like interior D line. We haven't talked about like guys like DJ Jones as well. But then on the edge rush unit, obviously Randy Gregory, they're trying to work him back in, get him back into football shape, all that kind of good stuff. But the big storyline I feel like has been with two younger players, and those are Jonathan Cooper and Nick Bonito. Nick Bonito was on a tear today. He beat Garrett Bowles around the edge for a sack. He beat Mike McGlinchey around the edge for what probably would have been a sack. And then he beat Cam Fleming out off the edge, like just almost consecutively. It was insane. Like Nick Bonito has been out there on like a man on a mission the past couple of days.
Yeah.
He's someone again who's popped up on my notes coming off the edge. Keep an eye out, Broncos country. Nick Bonito could be in for a big year too.
So, Gage, I didn't get a real good look at him when we were out there on Saturday, but is he bulked up at all in the offseason?
It looks like he may have put on like 5 or so pounds, but he hasn't lost any of that burst and that quickness that he's always had.
Right.
So, I mean, we've seen some players. I remember Von Miller tried to bulk up a few years ago, and it felt like he lost a little bit of his burst and his quickness. And I believe that was the year that he suffered his season-ending injury to his foot. So, I mean, we've seen edge players try to bulk up before and that not necessarily go well. But obviously, Nick Bonito was someone who was kind of knocked for being a little bit undersized. So I think he put a little bit of weight on and has a little bit more muscle tone to him, but he still looks like a bolt of lightning out there.
Yeah. He's definitely a guy that when you want to talk about, and when you're a bad team, there's a lot of people there's a lot of dirty hands, to use the Sean Payton term. There's a lot of dirty hands, as far as players that, have to play, really well. But I will say that Nick Bonito was one of those players, that really did have to have a really good camp. And there's one of the things that I will say, it's kind of like rebounding in basketball. That is a pretty easy transition for you into the NFL. I will say for Nick Bonito, what is a pretty easy transition for him is the fact that he is quick off the ball. He has a quick first step. And, even though he may not be as good in the running game, if you go back and you look at some of the statistics, even into college, he had one of the highest pass rush win rates out of any pass rusher the last 5 to 10 years coming out of college. That's like comparing guys like Myles Garrett, even from Texas A&M. So I mean, like, he definitely has shown the propensity to win that snap. The question is just, can he be a better run defender? But I mean, if this continues and he becomes that type of presence, he will force himself by this staff to carve himself a playing time and truly become that pass rush specialist early in his career, which would be a big deal for himself and for, of course, Bronco fans, because they need him to be that kind of guy in his second year.
And I think people were forgetting about him, but like Gage mentioned, just has really come alive these last couple practices, and we need him, especially with Barron out for at least the first 6 games. So Mike asked about Riley Moss. Mike, we did talk about him a little bit earlier. He's just missed the last 2 practices, and they are saying illness. Both Kliss and Albrecht are saying he has an illness, and he'll be back soon. Another topic that I didn't even mention to you guys, but since we last talked, some Hall of Fame finalists for the seniors committee have been announced, and the Broncos are really well represented, and I'm pretty excited about this one. On the players' side, they've narrowed it down to 12 finalists, and they're up to 3 candidates get selected, and this is on August 22nd, so 3 weeks from today. So that the show that night, we'll be able to talk about whether Randy Gradishar was one of those 3. Some of the other options are Ken Anderson, Maxie Bond, Roger Craig, Joe Jacoby, Albert Lewis, Steve McMichael, Eddie Meter, Art Powell, Sterling Sharp, Otis Taylor, and Al Wistert. A couple of those guys, I don't even know anything about them. But the fact that Randy is now in a position where he could be one of the 3 of 12, it just feels like there's a lot of momentum right now. Thoughts, guys?
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely one of those players that you have been clamoring for, even if you are a young Bronco fan who knows your history, or an older Bronco fan who very well knows their history, like Glenn and Mile High Prophet and Mundungus, of course, because he's old too. But
he's your age.
Can't forget about
you guys
Bill.
are the same age.
But I just think that like the time has finally come, I think, for people to really realize how good Randy Gradishar is. I mean, back even when the recording of tackles was even recorded, he was that type of player where he was almost like recording 150 tackles like every single season, if not 200. There was one point, I think, where they did a certain calculation where like he had almost like 200 tackles a season. So like he was one of those players that was like Ray Lewis before Ray Lewis. I mean, he was a tackling machine, and hopefully he can get his due. And hopefully this can open up the other doors for some of the other Bronco players, guys like Carl Mecklenburg and et cetera. Some of those other players that are very deserving as well to go into the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
So with Randy Gradishar, Gage, go ahead. I'm sorry, I cut you off.
Oh, no, you're good. I just wanted to say that something that my guy Ron, who I met out at training camp the other day, touched on is like he's someone who's really trying to campaign for Randy to get in the Hall of Fame. A lot of times we see these guys either get inducted posthumously, or by the time they're inducted, they're in a position where they're unable to travel, medical reasons or whatnot. So for guys like Randy, we want to try to get them in where they're able to actually see and enjoy and appreciate and see their recognitions toward this game get recognized. So that's why I'm really clamoring for someone like Randy Gradishar, even as a younger Broncos fan who I haven't watched a whole lot of Randy Gradishar, but I also am well aware of the impact that he's had on this franchise, and am well aware of the recognition that needs.
Well, I mean, this is not to dampen the fact that Pat Bowlen is in the Hall of Fame, but that, to your point, like that's the thing, is like, you wish that he was inducted earlier so that he could enjoy with that family in person the Hall of Fame induction. So like, to your point, like that's one of the reasons why, hopefully, we can get to that, and people like that can, enjoy the Hall of Fame, but yeah, I think also too, Mike Shanahan. It seems.
Well, let me if I can make one more point on before we move on. But with Randy, and Cam touched upon it. Joe Collier was monitoring the defensive genius back in the day, that the architect for the Orange Crush defense. He was logging the tackles, and he didn't just average 200 in 1 year. He averaged 200 over the course of his career. He had over 2,000 tackles. And I think one of the things that they've said is that, that it was so unbelievable of a statistic that they didn't believe it was accurate. And I said, all right, well, then take a third of those out. Now the guy in 10 years has this many tackles. I mean, his numbers are so crazy. NFL Defensive Player of the Year in 78, 2-time first-team All-Pro, 3-time second-team All-Pro, 7 Pro Bowls, Broncos Ring of Fame, just 19 and a half sacks, 20 interceptions, and 4 touchdowns. I mean, this guy is unbelievable. And the fact that the Orange Crush, I mean, the other point to it is the Orange Crush doesn't have one player represented in the Hall of Fame. I'm really hoping that. Cam, you were starting to say something about Shanahan and Reeves, and those two guys are coach and contributor committee finalists. Only one will come out of that, and it looks like there are about 12 of those as well. So those chances are a little bit harder. And I mean, we've talked about Mike Shanahan. I know I'm rambling on a little bit, but I mean, the guy's won 2 Super Bowls, and his coaching tree is just out of control as we speak now. And before we get to Bowanis, what do you think of those 2 candidacies?
Yeah, there's really not much to even add with Mike Shanahan. I mean, he has 3 Super Bowls, right? I mean, 1 with the 49ers, 2 with the Broncos. I mean, He's especially in a day to touch a little bit of what you said about the coaching staff, like in a day when it seems like it's a little bit of a dying breed, the Shanahan offense, it's not. It's like you are seeing a little bit of some different teams and offenses incorporate different variations of the Shanahan tree, and coaches come from that tree. Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan. I mean, the list goes on and on and on as far as, coaches from that tree that have been successful. Matt LaFleur being another one.
Mike McDaniel,
Mike McDaniel, of course, being a former Broncos ball boy. I mean, so like it's insane the type of collaboration that you've seen from the Shanahan tree, and contributions that you've seen post the Shanahan coaching side of things, with the Broncos. So he absolutely belongs in the Hall of Fame.
And the fact that he's not there already is criminal. It's disgusting because though he's still contributing to the game after being out of the game for 10 plus years or whatever it is. I'm sorry. I mean, just the dude's resume speaks for itself. His coaching tree speaks for itself. And this isn't to knock on someone like Dan Reeves, who I feel like does deserve recognition for his accomplishments in Denver, his accomplishments with the Giants, the Falcons. I feel like Dan Reeves definitely deserves love and appreciation, but Mike Shanahan is in a completely different league, and the fact that he's not in the Hall of Fame just showcases, in my opinion, the bias of the Hall of Fame selection committee.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So now we get to Bawana's question, which is like the Sophie's choice of Sophie's choices for Broncos fans. And really for me, it boils down to a Randy or Mike.
Yeah.
But I got to go with Randy. I think he's the most egregious omission from the Hall of Fame in all of the NFL in history. And we can move on after that. But it sounds like Bawana wants to say that that'll be our only opportunity to get in. But what do you think?
It's just hard to say with Randy because it seemed like at one point Terrell Davis was never going to get in. And then the one time that he gets in, it just takes it completely off guard, or even Floyd Little. It never seemed like Floyd Little was going to get in, and Floyd Little got in, and so I think that just when you think it's impossible, it is always possible. So it's always possible that Randy Gradishar will get in. So I will say Randy as well. And I did. Yeah. So
keep going. Mike says Randy. Jeff says Randy. Keep going there.
I mean, to your point, it's between Randy and Mike, though. I will say it seems like there's a lot more steam in the last 3 years for Mike Shanahan, but that's not deterring, of course, Randy Gradishar. But it seems like in the last 3 or so years from Bronco fans and everything. Yeah, that's when I was talking about that's when I was talking about Pat Bowlen and in enshrining him when he was alive versus, obviously when he had passed. But yeah, it's between, of course, those two. Nothing against Dan, but just it does seem, like I said, though, that Mike Shanahan is garnering a lot more attention lately within the last 3 years, though, from some Bronco fans.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like it probably is going to be Mike, but again, man, at this point, Randy's recognitions need to be cemented in the Hall of Fame. It has to happen.
Right.
And I mean, it feels like at this point, it's almost now or never.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, I mean, we've touched on a lot of stuff, and thank you guys for allowing me to be like leading you on this roller coaster ride. I'd be remiss.
Broncos country, let's ride.
Roller coaster. If we'd be remiss if we didn't give a happy belated birthday to DeMarcus Ware. He celebrated yesterday, and he's going to be celebrating with his Hall of Fame induction coming up. I'm so excited about that. So thrilled that he was with the Broncos. But guys, I have so many more topics, but we're at the hour mark. Any last words, fellas?
No, just I want to give a quick shout out to Gage for the hard work that he's been doing at training camp. He's putting in all that good work down there, and reporting. I think the thing is, like, I think back to when I was starting out. I graduated college in 2015, and I was looking for something, and obviously I was a little bit unemployed, but I wanted to do something Broncos related. So what did I do? I was accepted, obviously, by predominantly Orange, but that was the job. So I just kind of figured, you know what? It was free. I was able to get in. So I went and was there for 29 out of the 32 days to sadly watch Vinegar play, which was Paxton Lynch play quarterback. But it was a lot of fun. It was able to, for me to be a nice little network to really get into the game quickly. And so, Gage, thank you so much for your hard work and everything that you've been able to contribute. And I'm sure it's an absolute blast right now in what feels like it's already day 6 of training camp. So, Gage, thank you so much for everything that you, and Glenn, you hosted this so well. I think you're coming for Mike's job.
Believe me, I don't want
Seriously,
that
man.
job.
Yeah,
Anyway.
shout out Glenn, man. You did a great job keeping me on track today, and that's not easy to do.
Well, I appreciate it, guys, and it was a pleasure meeting you within the last week in person. So I can say I'm the only one that of our 4 that knows each of you on a personal like actually in person level. So you know what, we've got a ton of shows on MHRT. Sports Nonsense and Whiskey is coming up shortly as well. Cam's got mainly Broncos. We got the Wild Wild West. Both of those are tomorrow. Orange and Brew is on Thursdays. I mean, Bronco Bill with Broncos Breakdown on Fridays, and we're adding to the mix. We got some things in store. So just stick with us, and thank you so much for all the support. It's going to be an exciting season.
And actually, what I was just going to say to tease the guest that I'm going to have for tomorrow, we are going to have the infamous John Mitchell, who was on the plane with Sean Payton when he was coming to Denver. We are going to, so he's going to be on our show tomorrow.
Yeah,
so,
sure.
Of course, that question will be asked.
John must have a ton of frequent flyer miles because he is on the plane with a lot of different football-related people. It's exactly. The guy breaks. He's like the James Palmer of, or the Shefty of aviation or something.
Yeah.
Anyway, all right, guys, have a great night. We will see you next week.
Peace. Even when you feel low, you can still go.
I think we're still live.